Hello, welcome to part one of your Tyros to Genos introduction guide. I've got behind me both of the keyboards. We've got the new Genos here on the left, and on the right we've got a Tyros 5. Now what I'm going to be showing you in this particular video is what the main differences are between the two, because of course you'll be used to playing Tyros 5, and with your new Genos you might wonder where some of the buttons are gone and which things are different. This is going to be quite a broad overview, but it should be good to get you going. Okay, so the most important thing I should probably say about changing over to the Genos is, in the Genos you have everything that you had on Tyros 5. All of the same voices, all of the same styles, everything is in there. By the time we've got it delivered to you, we would have transferred everything. So in effect, you've got with your Genos a Tyros 5 built in, so you're not really losing anything. And the same goes for if you're changing from a Tyros 4, 3, 2 or 1. It's all in there, all the old voices are in there, and we'll get into how to access them later on. But it's about what's new on there is what you want to know about. And some of the first things I want to show you are where they've moved some of the buttons to. If you take a close-up look of the front of the Genos, all along here you may notice the blue buttons have stayed in the same place. Well, this is really good of Yamaha. They're quite sensitive to people upgrading through the keyboard range, and they've kept the style controls here on the left, and they've kept their one-touch settings and their multi-pads here on the right, and registrations are also here as well. Now we'll come into registrations a little bit later on about how they've changed, but generally speaking, you've got the speaker mounts on the top, the music rest, the big screen in the middle. Everything is more or less in the same place. But let's get into what some of the changes are. Okay, now what has stayed in the same place? Style control here on the left. We've got our intros, main variations, your endings as well, and your start and stop buttons, and of course your main accompaniment button is in here on the left, same place as it was in Tyros. Now moving over to the right side of the keyboard, we have got the part select, and this is in just the same place as it was on your Tyros. We also have multi-pads. They've moved ever so slightly, but they are more or less in the same place there as well. Now as you go over to the left of the keyboard, you'll be able to see basic things like the master volumes in the same place, but look to the left of it, we have the on and off button. Very handily they've moved it back to the front of the keyboard instead of being hidden around the back of the Tyros. You've probably spent hours and hours craning your arm over the back of the Tyros to try and turn the thing on and off. Luckily on Genos they've moved that to the front. So that's the on and off button and the volume. Your USB sticks for putting your various files in. On Tyros we had one in the front just here, but if you look over on the Genos on the right hand side, we also have one USB in the same place, but there are two extra ones on Genos. There's one in the back and there's one on the underneath. Now the one in the underneath does have a panel on it, which means you can plug something into it and just leave it there. And that's been very useful. If you put a very, very large USB stick in the underneath, you can use it just as an extra storage unit. So a few other buttons that have stayed in the same place you'll be familiar with. We have the harmony and sustain buttons here on Tyros. These can be found on Genos in more or less the same place. We have harmony, echo and sustain just here. So those you'll find in the same place. On the Tyros top left, the mic controls for your microphone inputs and your vocal harmonies are all on the top left of Tyros, and also they're on the top left of Genos as well. Up here in the mic section, and you have the mic volume control there as well, so that's going to be quite handy for the singers out there. Now quite an important one I think is the style control on Genos. First time you sit at it, you might go to choose a style from the left hand side on your Tyros and you might think, hang on a minute, there isn't a style section. Now that's because your styles which were up here and your voices which were up here now moved onto these 6 white buttons just here. Okay, now really this makes it much easier, I think, and it also saves a lot of space because most of the keyboard is operated through the touch screen, and we'll get into the touch screen a little bit later on. But if you zoom in on the touch screen now, what you'll see is when I press style, up comes all of our styles, and when I press voice, up comes our voices. So these white buttons here, and the same goes for song as well, will be in place instead of the voice category and the style category that you had on the right and left. So a little bit different, and you might go fumbling around wondering where your styles have gone, but that's all through these white buttons here now. That's how we control them, and we'll have more on the touch screen later on. Okay, registrations on Tyros. We had the registrations on the right, the blue buttons here. A very useful section which most people that play Tyros would have used registrations. Now if we go over to the Genos and you look for registrations, they're not on the right anymore, they're underneath the screen just here. And you might have noticed that you have an extra 2. We've now got 10 in total now for registrations, so they've moved slightly just to there. Sliders, which were also under the screen on Tyros, just here. These have moved to the left of the screen on the Genos. Here they are, and we'll do a little bit more on the sliders as well later. So they've moved from under the screen. We now have sliders over here on the left hand side, and we also have these new knobs as well, which can be used for various different functions, and again we'll go into more depth later on. So that's where your sliders have gone to. Your one touch setting buttons are still just to the right of the screen as they were on Tyros, although they've moved ever so slightly. Your data entry wheel, which was just below the screen, has moved on Genos just over to the right hand side. Now on the right hand side of Tyros, with the voice effect buttons, you're probably noticing that if we go over to Genos and look at the same section, it's missing quite a few, and this is to do with using the touch screen, because most of the other sections that we had up here can be operated by touching a button on the screen now, which again we'll go into more detail later on. But you'll realise the further into it we get that the touch screen has actually allowed the Genos design to save a lot of space, and there's no need. You can almost get away without having any buttons on here, because you can almost control the entire thing using the touch screen. But we'll get into that in more depth later on. And balance displays as well. On Tyros we had the balance displays along the bottom, so you could see what volume your various voices and your style accompaniments were. On Genos it's changed, and it's all up here in the above the sliders. We've got style, left, right, right 1, right 2, so it's actually a digital display up here, and as I move these up and down you can see the values changing up there as well. So that's where your balance control has gone. Also, if you stay up in that section just to the left, we have our song section, which on Tyros was more or less in the same place, but they've moved it ever so slightly, and we've got song A and song B. Now if you're wondering what that means, song A would be for your onboard recording, and if you had an extra song that you were perhaps playing through a USB stick, like David sometimes does a recording or a performance where someone's singing from a USB stick, you can balance the volume of the two together using this slider just here. So it's quite handy, and a much more ergonomic design for your song controls there. Now a couple of other new things on Genos in terms of the controls. The home button I'd like to show you, and that's the one at the top left here. Now this is going to return us, no matter where we are or what menu we've got into. If we push this, it brings us back to the home screen. Now you might remember on your Tyros, if we were in a sub-menu of a sub-menu of a sub-menu, we'd have to hit the exit button repeatedly to come back to the home screen, which wasn't a big problem, but it would be handy to just have one button you press once to go back to the home screen. And on Genos we now have that. The home button here on the top left, no matter where you are, what you're doing, press that one and it goes back first time back to the home screen. Also, some new buttons you might have spotted under that particular section are called the assignable buttons, and these again are designed to make your life easier when you're operating this keyboard. And as you might have guessed by the name, you can assign these buttons to various different tasks. We'll go into more depth again, but you get 6 assignable buttons here, and there's an extra one over here on the left hand side, which a lot of people are assigning to fade in and out, because that button, you've probably spotted, is not on there any longer. So assignable buttons are going to be very handy. We'll get into more depth with them later on, but that's what those ones are, and they weren't on Tyros. Now we've looked at USBs, there's 2 new ones in there, and the knobs. The screen, as well as being touch screen, it's also considerably larger as well. Tyros, it's probably a little bit misleading because it had this whole panel at the front. This wasn't a huge screen, but when you compare it to Genos, we now have a 9-inch screen from corner to corner. Now there's no panel, in case you're wondering, to lift it up like you could with Tyros, but most people are finding that because of the angle that it's slanted at, when you're sat down playing with it, you can see it very, very clearly, and the quality of the screen is quite a lot better now as well, so it's much easier to navigate. But again, more on that later on. Another new section will be playlist up here, part of these 6 sort of general control buttons up here where our style and voice buttons were. The bottom right one's called playlist, and really you can think of this as Music Finder, but it's much more in depth than Music Finder, much more useful to use, and again we'll go into it in more detail. But playlist, when I press that, will open up a list of songs on here. Actually, I haven't got it loaded in here just at the minute, but it'll act just like Music Finder in your Tyros, and we have also taken your Music Finder songs and put them in your Genos for you, or if you haven't got that, just let us know and we can do it for you. So again, you don't lose anything from Tyros when you go over to Genos in terms of your Music Finder. So there's been a few changes, as you can see, from where the buttons are and where various things are displayed between the 2 keyboards, but I hope that's been helpful. This is only part 1 of your Tyros to Genos transfer pack. There'll be more each month as we go through, and written guides as well. So while a few things have changed, I think you'll see, especially after you've watched our video on the touchscreen, that actually Genos is going to be much, much easier to navigate your way around and to operate. That's certainly what the early people that have received them are saying, and I agree with them. But I hope that was useful as a start for you, and watch the touchscreen video next. Bye for now.